Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get to it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Scarlett Wilson on the podcast coming to us from the UK, which, by the way, Scarlett is one of the most British names out there because I don't even know if we have any Scarletts over here in the US anymore. So the moment that I found out, I was like, yeah, she's got to be from England. But hey, that is great. But yeah, she's coming on here to share her health and fitness journey and discuss all things health and fitness with us. And, most importantly, she's our current guest. Scarlett, thank you so much for coming on.
That's okay. Thank you for the intro.
I try my best with some of these intros. You got to mix it up every once in a while because I've done so many of these darn podcasts. But to start things off, a question that I still get flack for to this day because they're like, oh, you ask this all the time, but it's a good icebreaker. What is the weather like today?
Sunny, but deceiving because it's quite cold.
Sunny in the UK? What the hell's going on over there?
Yeah, I know. Like, it's sunny, but, like, it's cold. So you still have to wear a jumper.
Yeah, it's cloudy over here. I mean, hopefully as people can see. So, yeah, it is not. I mean, before we get too much into the winter weather, which is, unfortunately heading right for Minnesotans like me, and I don't even want to discuss it. Scarlett, to get things started, why don't you first off give us your backstory on what inspired and motivated you to get in the gym and eventually give bodybuilding a try?
Oh, it's very, very, it's a very long story.
Take as much time as you want, trust me.
Okay, so, like, quite from when I was, like, quite young, I had, like, some mental health issues and stuff like that, and, like, I ended up in, like, hospitals for anorexia and stuff like that, and then, I kind of that all just stemmed from different things, like, through growing up, just, like, bullying and some, like, abuse type things and stuff like that, so I think it was more so, like, I was really active before that, so I did, like, gymnastics growing up, horse riding, netball, all these type of things, and cross country running. But when that got like taken away from me when I was like in hospital, that like was so hard because I was always like so active and everything like that. And when you're told like you can do absolutely nothing, it's just like from being really active to nothing is just such a big difference. Like not being able to walk anywhere, not being able to do anything. So I think when I like was allowed when I came out of like an inpatient unit for the second time, I was like, right, like I just want to get like make sure I'm fueling myself properly so I can actually do exercise and what I love to do. And like obviously with like working out and stuff, like you get stronger at the same time, you change your physique, but it's in a positive way. Like it's not so like you're exercising just for like, you know, to burn calories or anything like that. It's just like you feel good, you're fueling yourself and you know it's like it's going it's going to do good things, you know? And then in lockdown, I was just kind of like, I was always like, I always looked up to bodybuilders. Like, I always saw some like bikini girls in there. I never really knew anyone's name or anything, but like in lockdown, I was like, right, I was meant to go to Australia like before lockdown, like just before it. But then obviously lockdown happened. So I just kind of was like, what is there to lose? Like, I wanted to do this for so long. I built myself like up from where I was. Like I wasn't impressive or anything when I first competed, but like it was a long way from where I came from, you know. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna give it a go because why not? So I just decided to enter the comp.
Were there any misconceptions that you had about the sport? Because, like, unfortunately, when you talk about bodybuilding, it's a sport that most people aren't aware of, and there's so many stereotypes and there's so many myths about the sport. Was there anything that you were concerned about before getting into the sport, or was it one of those things where you just wanted to dive right in and see what happens?
Well, I think a lot of other people were trying to change my perspective on it. So like we're saying like, oh, but you know, you're already so body conscious. Like, why would you want judges to judge you? Because then you're going to be more body conscious. And I was like, and I kind of like listened to that so much that I started to believe it. And that's why I always said like, oh no, I'll never get on stage and stuff like that. But like, it really isn't like that. Like, obviously they are judging your physique and everything, but it doesn't make you body conscious. Like, you just want to be better for yourself. Like as a bodybuilder, you know that you can only bring your best, like, and make the improvements.
This is also so much more of a mental sport than it is a physical sport, and a lot of people don't understand that. But as much as the physical change that you made, what has this journey been like for you mentally?
Oh, I suppose it depends on which part of my journey. But like I wouldn't lie. Like I always say, like I'm very an honest person. Like I wouldn't say like I don't struggle with body image issues still. Like that is the one thing that I do struggle with, but that's not like I think that what people don't understand is there's a difference between like anorexic feelings and like, you know, just random like normal body image issues. Like when you're struggling with anorexia and stuff, you have body image issues and then you will act upon those by like not eating or over exercising and stuff like that. But like as a bodybuilder, you will struggle with that sometimes. But like I'm not gonna, you know, I have never have a thing of like, oh, I'm gonna not eat or anything like that. Like it's just completely different, but people don't get that. And I think on social media, especially, if you say like, oh, I'm struggling with bad body image issues, for example, I've said that on my story before. I get reposted all over the internet, like on these websites, and then people say like, oh, she's still anorexic and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's not the same. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, the moment you decide to become a bodybuilder, you do decide that like I am never going to be big enough. Unfortunately, that just
Yeah.
comes with the territory where it's not going to happen. And how do you deal with that too? Because like you said, there is that difference, but it still is impact. Because like I've talked to some of the most in shape people on the planet, and they still at times think that they're not, like super good looking when it comes to their size and their physique. And it's like I always tell them, just look in a damn mirror. You're still better than 99.9% of the population. But how do you deal with that? Because it is different than anorexia, like you said.
Yeah, I think I just like remember where I started all the time. Because it's so easy to compare yourself to every single other person, like all the pros, all of this and that. But then you're just like, you will get there one day if you keep putting in the work. Like they didn't just transform like that, and you have to remember like where you started. Like for me, I had literally lost all my muscle mass, so I have to put all of that back on and more to be a bodybuilder. And you just have to like remember that. Like, so it's gonna take a long, long time, and most likely it's gonna take me way more years to come pro or like to get further than some other people who have been like healthy all their life. Or even like if you're overweight, for example, you're still holding more muscle than if you like have nothing left if you've lost it all. So yeah, just remind yourself where you come from. Really, is how I deal with it.
Especially with a journey like yours, which I mean, it's not rare, especially in bodybuilding, where they turn that one side of it into another, and they try to make a positive out of it, which is just really great. But I mean, with bodybuilding as well, just the structure of the sport too is something that isn't really that well known by the general public. But I mean, it's like you have to eat this amount of food, you have to work out
Yeah.
this amount of times. I mean, it's just so structured. Was that an adjustment for you at all, or were you always someone? I mean, there's always that type of person that is more of a structured person. Were you always like that, or was it something that you just had to adjust to when you got into this lifestyle?
I've always been like really structured. I've always had routine. I've always woke up really early, like 6 a.m. ever since I was younger. Like I've always been very structured and routine. I think as well, like being in competitive gymnastics, you do have that like you have to go, and like we were very like when you're in a higher place in gymnastics when from quite a young age, they're quite strict on you. So I think like that turned into a positive, I guess, even though like, if you broke your ankle, you're still going in the gym and doing like some conditioning. If you're not going to any parties, anything like that. So it's always very like structured and stuff. So for me, it's not really like an adjustment. It's just obviously like you just have to put your time into like just time manage properly. And like if you have these big goals, you have to make sure that you put the time where it is. And like if you're tired, it doesn't matter. Like you just got to do it.
I will say, out of all the guests I've had on, like gymnastics is probably the biggest background that I've gotten from the guests when they talk about their backstory. And I think it's because they are somewhat similar. Where like, yeah, just the amount of dedication that gymnastics takes is similar in itself to, bodybuilding. So there is a correlation, I think, where if I were to ask people like, where did you have any sports when you grew up? I think gymnastics is, one of the more popular ones. But I also love to talk genetics on this podcast because everybody that I ever know has always said this: oh my God, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back. And you just want to strangle them because it's like you can train just like them, you can eat just like them. You are not going to get the same results, unfortunately. That's just how it works. But whenever someone first gets started working out, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off, that they don't have to train as much. And then they have that one body part that just drags behind it, they have to train to oblivion. What was one body part that really took off for you? And what was one body part that you've just had to drag behind?
Okay, so I think it was like my fault though, but I would say probably like I actually before I was getting into like bodybuilding bikini, like I was still training, but like I looked at myself and I was like, oh, like my shoulders are so overpowering compared to everything else, and now like and then I started training them less. I'm like, why did I do that? Like because obviously in bikini you want big shoulders, big glutes, and it's like, but when I think that it's a difference between like a kind of like gym girl versus like a bodybuilder. It's like you don't look at yourself for what the criteria holds. So like you try and like be like balanced. Like you always like see, for example, like social media influencers like doing a ton of chest exercises. Like as a bikini girl, you're not going to do that. But like I don't think people don't understand that in the like general population. So I think shoulders actually were quite overpowering, but then like not overpowering, but like they were pretty good. And then I stopped doing them less, but then they like blew up in my second off season, so that was good. And then my legs are just like tiny, like my quads and stuff, because I didn't train them for ages. Like someone told me when I was like in an inpatient unit, like, oh, if you train your legs they'll get fat. So I believed them, and I didn't train them for like a year. So I was training upper body and abs for like a year more than I have my legs. So my legs are definitely um, like behind. But they've got better this off season. My glutes are like pretty good because I started doing glutes then. I was like, okay, I just need to just do glutes then, and then I started doing legs more. So it's like a kind of progression. I
I mean, I'm 6'3" myself, so my legs don't even get me started on that. Where it's like I've always made the joke I could inject pure muscle into them, and they're not going to gain an ounce. It's just not. Calves also, that's the number one genetic
yeah,
body part. I don't care what anyone says. You either have them or you don't. Some people, there's a few people that can actually train them and actually get them to look good, but mostly it is, the genetic factor of it, which is, I mean, again, some people just don't understand that. A lot of people, you're just born to either like do the sport with the genetic factor. I mean, some people try to push their luck and they just don't have the body type for it. Everyone has their own separate body type, and it's finding out what works best for you. But I mean, this is like we talk about time management too and all these other things. But one thing that I also like to talk about is what was your friends and family's reaction like when you announced them like, hey, I want to be a bodybuilder, and has it changed over time? Because I know they told you like ahead of time. Some people were telling you like it's just another form of like body dysmorphia and all that. But what was their attitude? Has it changed at all since then, or where are they at right now?
so my mum was like a bit like, oh gosh, I think the thing is they didn't really understand it because they knew like obviously I had to like when I was actually decided to do bodybuilding like a year ago, I was like already lean, like I didn't need to really diet down a lot. But like so I think they thought like, oh, she's gonna like restrict loads and like blah blah blah. But like it wasn't anything like that. So I think the more and when I first did my show, like they knew how much of a passion I had for it. So I think once they knew it, like they were like, okay, she's doing this. Like she actually, well, they already knew I was doing it for the right reasons, but they knew it wasn't just like a relapse or anything like that. And then when they saw obviously like me putting the weight back on and more in off season and stuff like that, they started to like realize what this sport is actually about. It's not just about like I think what people don't realize is that, like the people who judge me on social media as well. It's like they think that they see bodybuilding, they're like, oh, she just wants to stay shredded all the time. But like that's not it. Like I have to push my weight up in off season to where I'm comfortable. I have to do all these things, and you wouldn't invest all this money and stuff as well into posing and all that stuff if you actually didn't have a passion for bodybuilding. So I think like people forget that bodybuilding isn't just staying lean. It's like you've got to push yourself like and invest so much money into it, and you can just easily like this is what I say to people when they just like because people send me messages that have been sent to them like my friends or whatever. People like bitch about me like to them, and then then they say send me the messages, and I'm like, if I was doing it for the wrong reasons, I wouldn't be spending hours of my day posing. I wouldn't be spending hundreds of pounds on bikinis. I wouldn't like. You can easily just restrict yourself if you want. I wouldn't have to do. I wouldn't have to do that. But yeah, so getting back to the question, like my mum was like fine about it, like all my family was fine about it until there. My dad's not very supportive of it, but I mean that's just his issue, I guess.
It's hard to see your daughter up on stage in a bikini. Like, let's be
Yeah,
honest. You got to
I,
give it to him for that, at least. That's the one thing I've heard, at
yeah,
least with the dads, too.
that's
So,
very I kind of like say, but I mean he's never been really supportive anyway of anything. So like I just like apart from like I think he just likes sports like gymnastics and like cross country. And when we stopped doing those, he was just like, oh, now he says like to me like, oh, you're wasting your talent on those things. That it was on those things. I'm like, you grow older and you adapt. And
doesn't he realize that, like, gymnastics has a cap at, like, 20 years old, basically,
yeah,
where, like, then you can't really do anything anyways? So,
yeah.
yeah.
Like so like for because I was like quite good in cross country and running and stuff as well, and he did that as well. I think he's just like he thinks I can now like do all these things. I'm like my knees one would give out because I had Oscar Schlatter growing up and they like really hurt, so I had to stop running for that anyway. And like it's just not something I enjoy at all. And like when people put a pressure on you, like it was very pressurizing. Like the standard that he held when he held that standard against me, it was just like too much. Especially like being younger, I was much younger when I did that. But like now, obviously, you put a pressure on yourself, which is in a good way, not like a pressurizing way, and you enjoy that. Like in bodybuilding, you have to put that pressure on yourself, but like it's a self motivating thing, not a like destructive thing.
I mean, yeah, I was 6'3" at the age of 14, and I was one of those kids that just took off really early and then never grew since then. So I had Osgood slaughter myself because, yeah, my knees just couldn't
Yeah,
deal with
it's
being that tall, that young. So, yeah, it is brutal. Yeah, absolutely. I struggled with that as well. But how do you deal with the rebound phase of the sport, the off season where you are putting on weight? Because that is the hardest thing for a lot of the guests that I have on is just seeing their body slowly, put on more weight after they've seen themselves like at their most shredded. Has that been hard for you, and how do you deal with that? Because that is just a lot of bodybuilders I have on say that that's like the most trying time of their journey.
Like, I've never struggled with, like, the whole controlling food off season type thing, like, I'm good on my reverse, I, like, fine with that, and I think some people judge me as well for how I do off season because I don't just, like, put on a ton of weight fast and then slow, like, I do it as a reverse and I, like, get my calories, but then I get my calories high and, like, I still put on weight, but it's just, like, a kilo a month rather than, like, 10 kilos, then having to mini cut and then having to, do that. So in all, like, I have more time gaining than some other people do. Like, everything works for different people, but what keeps me, like, focused on, like, continuing to gain and when I feel uncomfortable in that, like, right now I'm, like, really uncomfortable, but, like, at the same time, I know it's for a purpose. I know, like, you have to get to, like right now I'm the heaviest I've ever been in my whole life, and I know that's gonna transfer to my stage look next time, and that's going to allow me to push more weight, and that's going to actually change my body. And like what I say to myself as well is like, you have those days you look at yourself and you either think like, oh, my legs are absolutely tiny, or they're fat, and there's no in between. There's never like, oh, they're really muscular. So it's like they're either gonna look the same. Like when you diet down, they're only going to get smaller. They're not going to get bigger. Like especially right now, I'm natty, so I'm not going to have bigger legs like when I dial down. Um, it's just I just remind myself it's for the purpose, keep the bigger goal in mind, and then that's what keeps me going. Really.
Do you at least enjoy the more food?
I do quite like eating more food, but like my small body like requires so much food. Like I have to carb up like a shit ton as well. Like compared to other bikini competitors, they'll like carb up on like I don't know 200 carbs, and they're like, oh, I'm having so much carbs for my carb up, and I'm here like 500, 600 grams, and then the next day like 500 grams, and I'm like, I I think it's like a blessing and a curse because you get so much food and it's nice and like you can play around with it, or whatever. But like because I'm only 5 foot, like at the minute I'm on 2,800, and I'm kind of like maintaining slightly gaining. But like that's a lot for my small body, and I don't have like a huge ton of muscle either. Like I've got some muscle, but I know that I'm not like massive. So it's like it has to go somewhere, and I feel very uncomfortable, like bloated, a lot of the time because it is a lot of food for my size. And I know it's only going to get more. So that's what I struggle with most, to be honest. Just the bloating feeling is uncomfortable.
Yeah, 2,800 calories at 5 feet. Good God, yeah, that is quite a lot. So yeah, more. I mean, hey, more power to you for being able to deal with that because that's like, yeah, that's. I mean, I'm probably only at like a couple hundred more than that, being like almost a foot and 3 inches taller than you. So yeah, geez.
People downplay it, like they don't realize how much is for my size. Like they're just like, oh, like, and some people would say like, oh, that's just like nothing. Like, and I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. I'm so small, and I don't have like the mass for it to go anywhere either. Like I do have mass, but not as bit much as other people. So it is that's kind of hard because at the minute I'm even on that I'm basically maintaining slightly gain. Like I had to dial it back down a little bit last just for this week because my digestion was just not coping. Like you get to a point where you feel like you're not even digesting the food, and it's like your performance is going down because you're not even like able to digest the food. So this week I've just pulled back down like 20 carbs less, and then I'm going back up again next week. So I've got to a point in off season now where I'm just like I just want it to be perfect.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that many times from a lot of competitors, and I mean, everyone always has those off days too. And I love to talk about this because a lot of people just assume from following people on Instagram that like, oh yeah, they must be on, 24/7. They must always have, their plan. They must always follow up. But it's like, that's not going to happen. You are going to have those days where you just feel like crap. And the one thing that I say differentiates bodybuilders from the general public is that the general public will find ways to, not go to the gym and work out. But bodybuilders, they just have that drive inside of them to go, and they end up, usually getting that workout in. Where does that drive come from for you? Where do you find that extra added energy that a lot of people just don't have?
It's just always reminding where I want to be. Like one day I want to be on that pros like Olympia stage. Like if that's in like 20 years, 30 years, I don't care. Like, I want to be there. So like I just think like every single day counts. Like if you just like let yourself slip for one day, you're already putting yourself behind where you could have been like before. Like obviously there's some like instances where like you can't because maybe you've ended up in hospital or something, but like if you can do it, like if you can do it, but you're just like telling yourself you can't, then you're just putting yourself down and you're just putting yourself further back. So like if I'm ill, I'm still gonna train. Like people will hate me for that, but like at the same time, I know I can still physically do it. I might just take it as like a deload session, or I might just like see what I can do and push myself and go in with a mentality of like I'm not ill. I'm gonna try and still match my numbers and go on progress. Um, But, like, if I feel and to be honest, like, when I train, if I'm ill, like, it happened to me last week. I was ill, but I train and I feel better when I train, and then afterwards I'll just feel shit again. So it's like it takes my mind off it, to be honest.
Yeah, pre-COVID, there were a handful of times where I would work out sick. And when I'm talking about sick, I'm not talking about like the flu or anything. I'm talking about, just like a runny nose or a cold. But yeah, those are some of the hardest days where you're just like, give me all the cough drops. And, luckily I worked out at home a lot of times too. I got a decent setup there, so I would just do it there then. But then even, like you said, you feel great for probably about an hour after you work out, and then you just feel like crap again afterwards
Yeah.
because you're like, okay, why'd I do this then? Because I just feel just as worse now. But hey, it's good for that little moment of time. But also, posing is one of the things that is like so undervalued. Most people do not mention how hard it is. And when you talk about, posing, your diet, and your training, a lot of people assume that posing isn't the hardest side of that. But for a lot of the guests, it is. What has your experience with posing been like?
Oh, it's been such a big journey. So when I started posing, like I was like teaching myself, then I had like a subscription site, and it was all right. Like I learned a few things, but I just did so much research. I posed myself, and I actually was so surprised how I posed. Like when looking back on it, I'm like, how did I even do that? Like I did it really well, but like I spend an hour every single day doing it. Like so, I was like hammering. And then in my first off season, I only did like a small 4 month off season, mainly because I mentally it was like really hard for me as my first proper off season, putting on a lot of weight, and I just wanted to see like, was it worth it? Do you know what I mean? And it's now proved to myself it was, which is why I'm doing this longer off season now. But through that off season, like I just struggled so much mentally with like seeing my body change so much. Like I would over pose. So like I'd pose too much, but then like also doing the wrong things, like arching my back way too much, trying to pop out my glute way too much, which then skewed the poses off because I was like trying to focus on the things that I was building, like putting, do you know what I mean? Which kind of like messed up my posing this time round when I stepped on stage. So I'm kind of like I get really annoyed about that, but then I've completely fixed it now. So it's like I'm just excited to like get better. But I think it's just like the consistency is like so key to hold in off season too. Like I think as well that's the hardest thing in terms of like self discipline is doing the posing as well, because you don't in off season you don't want to see yourself like you don't want to look at yourself all the time, especially when you've gone from like staging doing your poses to like in off season they're completely different, and like you'll see like maybe a back like roll or something, um and like it's so easy to skip on as well because you're like, oh, I can just do it another day. It's not like training. Like training's like you have that split and you have that structure, but posing you kind of do anytime, anywhere, and it's just like, oh, you can do it another day. But you just got to hold yourself like that structure and discipline to do it.
Out of the poses that you do, what is your favorite and what is your least favorite?
So in bikini is only front and back pose. I think it depends on what time, like right now, like what time of off season I am. So right now I just hate my front pose just because of my waist, but then like my back pose, like I don't mind that much. And then I think in prep I probably prefer my front pose because my waist looks really small, because my waist goes like quite small, like my waist is like quite genetically small, which is really good. um and then from the I just yeah back pose, like last time I lost quite a lot of size in my legs as well because I was doing like quite a lot of steps. I dieted. Like when I get lean, like I get like pretty damn shreddy. Like I don't really step on stage out. Oh, I never would step on stage out of condition, but I think I get like I I think it's best to get too shredded for bikini and then carb up. Like it's just way better than just like coming in like soft, in my opinion, because you come in softer anyway. You lose some lines if you carb up properly anyway. Fill up really well for bikini anyway. So
Well, and speaking of stepping on stage, what is that moment like for you when you finally get to step on stage and show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months on?
it is like the best feeling. Like I thought, because like growing up I had stage fright, so it's like when I first ever stepped on stage, I was like, I don't know how I'm really gonna deal with this, and I was like, I was quite shaky and stuff, but like when you get on there, you just have to put on this like complete alter ego, like just pretend like you're the most confident person ever, and like you're gonna like you just have to act like you are the winner. Like as soon as like you come on, you're like, I'm gonna win this. They're gonna think I'm gonna win this. Even if you don't, it doesn't matter. Like you put through that persona, that they will like see your confidence like straight away, and that's gonna put you in their mind. Like if you come on stage like looking, we're not really looking at them, looking down, they're not gonna think like, oh, she's the winner. Like so, you just gotta like, it just feels good to actually put on that confident side as well, because it's not really often you can do that. Like as someone who is like quite, so not insecure, but like kind of, and not really like confident in all areas of like life. It's nice to kind of like act like you really are, like just like you kind of like you have to in that sense, and it just feels good knowing that you've like every time I know I step on that stage is like I've improved. I know I will like every single time. So I think that's just rewarding in itself.
What is your favorite post-show meal to have?
um I don't really often go out for like a full meal because normally as well bikini's on last and we're always like really late, which is like really annoying. But normally I just have like I have such a sweet tooth, so normally I'll have like two desserts. So I've had like two donuts before, two cookies and stuff like that. Like I'll just kind of have like two desserts, and that will like do me to be honest.
Well, and yeah, especially as you've dieted down for so long, people don't also understand that you're not going to just, pig out and eat an entire buffet because then first of all, you gain like 40 pounds or something
Yeah,
like that. Like it's not. So yeah,
yeah,
you gotta definitely, take things slow, but especially as you get down to your shred look. I mean, you're not the average looking woman. I mean, if you were to walk out in public sometimes, like especially like during the summertime and you weren't, to be covered up, like you were going to the beach or something, like good God, you're going to be, I like to compare it to being like a mini celebrity where it's like, you're just going to draw people's attention because it's human nature. What is that like for you? And has it gotten easier for you to get used to it as you've, done this a little bit longer? Or is it still one of those things where you're like, okay, this is weird that I'm drawing so many people's attention?
Well, I think when I was like this prep was like because I was holding the most muscle I had like the last prep I did, it was like summer and I was like walking into town and like I couldn't even believe how many people was like staring at me. Like I think it's because I know that I'm smaller compared to other bodybuilders, but in the real world, like I'm way more shredded and like bigger than other people, if that makes sense. So when they see like especially like a small girl who's like delts and veins are popping everywhere, I think they're kind of like oh shit, like what the hell. And I've had some like weird responses from like guys as well, like literally just walking down the street with their girlfriend, like saying like "all right, geezer" and stuff like that. I'm like, why are you talking to me like that?
Okay, what does that mean? Because we're in another UK. All right, geezer. What's that mean?
So that it's just kind of like saying you say to like another guy, like saying like
Oh,
"all right, mate," like saying like
okay.
gym like that, but it's just kind of like say like just him kind of saying like oh you're a bit manly kind of thing. um but yeah, I think it's mainly just like you get the attention for the glutes. I think that's the main thing. The glutes and the delts, but I mean, I don't know. I don't really mind it to be honest.
My favorite part of the podcast is learning British slang. So now we learned that. All right, geezer is another one. Rip the piss. I never even knew what that meant. So I learned that. Yeah, and then just I've learned a couple other ones too. But I mean, hey, nothing ever tops that. This was another British person who said that one person came up to him and said, "You're an embarrassment to look at," and that is the best insult I've ever heard. And that's the first of all the most British insult of all time, and that is like the harshest. Like that's like okay, you got to give props to that first. I mean, because like that's at least inventive and stuff. But yeah, it's I've always just found that funny. But for all is there any positive encounter that you've had that really just sticks out in your mind? Because there are a lot of positive encounters, and I mean, like I've said, if you see anyone like that and you want to give them a compliment, just give them a compliment because
Yeah,
you don't realize how far that can go in that person's day or just even in their lifestyle.
yeah. I don't really know. I've just had like people just maybe like
Then
compliment.
again, everyone, it is the UK, so people aren't really going to go out of their way to say it's. They're not Americans, where we're just going to say whatever's on our mind, and we're just going to go out of our way to give you compliments. So I do have to remember that when I'm talking to people from other countries.
I have had like it is weird because it's mainly like guys, but I know the difference between like guys who have like good intentions and like sexual intentions, but like there have been a lot of good guys who are like good intentions. Just saying like, oh, that's really impressive. Or like even for example, just like as well, family and friends, like they've seen how far I've come on my journey. And when they've seen me like not for a long time, they're like, you've made so much progress, which is like really nice to hear.
Absolutely, and I mean, I hate cardio more than life itself, and I've said this multiple times, but I mean, I just absolutely hate it. I go for walks all the time, and I work in a warehouse, and I'm going to be going to it right after I'm done talking to you, where I get, around 20,000 steps a day. So it's, that's most of my cardio anyways. But what is your relationship like with cardio? Because unfortunately, when you become a bodybuilder, you sort of sign a deal with the devil when it comes to cardio.
Well, I'm like quite lucky. So as you know, like as I said, like I do have a lot of calories in my body as well. So when I do like lose like diet, like prep, I don't really have to do that much cardio. Like my first prep was genuinely like my first prep, I did 6K steps and that's it. And I was on 2,600 calories and I was just, my body was just responding so much. But then my second prep was like 1,400 calories and like 18K steps. So I just did like loads of steps and then like less for that. I think just people forget every single prep's different as well. Um, because I have a lot of people saying like, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Like, what's your next prep, or how many like what should I do for my prep?" I'm like, your body, everyone's body responds differently, and like every prep will be so different. Like, I wasn't expecting to. Like, a lot of people will say like, "Oh, you get your off season calories high, and then you won't have to diet more." Well, sometimes that's the opposite. Like, I know so many people who've got their calories way higher, but have had to diet way harder. So I think it's like I think it's a bit misleading sometimes when people say like, you know, get them so high and then you'll have to eat more, then you can eat more and diet on more, when that's not always the case. um but yeah, I don't have to really do any cardio. I do hit once a week.
6,000 steps. That's like if you just sat down for 23 hours and then walked an hour, just and then just did literally nothing the rest of the day. Like you literally
Yeah,
didn't. Jeez, that is.
like living like really like lean though. I think that's why. I think it's because I didn't really count my steps or anything before bodybuilding. I didn't. I was never one of those like a lot of anorexics kind of like had a big step count and stuff like that. I've never been that type of person. I'd always just go for a dog walk and then like you know I'd have the same like calories and stuff every day. So I was having 2,700 and that was my maintenance. I literally just had to drop by 100, do 6K steps, and I was like absolutely peeled, like striation. I had two. Like, I was told I was way too conditioned. So I think like my delts were so striated that it was ridiculous. And obviously because I didn't have a lot of mass at the time as well, I just looked like just absolute shredded. So I think I think when you go through like putting on way more mass and like having more body fat as well, it's gonna be more to take it off anyway.
Well, and if we're talking about the recovery side of sport, I mean, sleep is the most important thing. I don't care what anyone says. You disagree with me, I always tell them go pull an all-nighter and then go try to work out and tell me how that works out for you. But what is your relationship like with sleep? Because unfortunately, it's bipolar for all bodybuilders. I don't care what anyone says, especially as you get into your prep, sleep becomes harder. But even in your off season too, people do struggle a lot with sleep, especially in this day and age. But where do you fall on the sleep scale? Is it something that you don't struggle with as much, or is it something like me where you're just like, okay, I need to find ways to get more of it?
Yeah, so when I was like, I'd never had sleep issues until I was put in hospital when I was 14, and ever since then I've had like really bad insomnia. Like I take ages to get to sleep, and then when I get to sleep, I'm consistently waking up throughout the night, and it's never been better since like when I was 14. So I'm still kind of there. So I definitely need more sleep, but I'm just kind of used to it now. Like I don't really feel that tired from it or anything like that. I'm just kind of used to it. So yeah.
Are you like a coffee drinker or a tea drinker? Like, do you have to do anything to like get yourself hyped up or get yourself some energy?
Not really. I just kind of like get up, do my stomach vacuums and posing. I think just like having the routine kind of like gets you in the swing of things, I guess.
Okay, stomach vacuums is a thing that has always like amazed me because I've been doing this podcast now for over 4 years, and it didn't really start until I was like almost 2 years into this podcast that people like started posting about and talking about it. So when did you get into stomach vacuums? Because that to me is just, it's a fascinating thing, like to see people actually do it and stuff. But it has its benefits, and I didn't believe it at first, but then when I had so many guests talk about doing it, so how long have you been doing it, and like what benefits do you think it gives you?
So I like study the sport a lot because I have coached myself. So like I study like all the top teams. Like I study like every single thing people are doing, and obviously like if I see something that everyone's implementing, like the top teams for bikini are all implementing, like I'm gonna do it. So I think I started like this last prep doing them like really often, like literally every single morning. All in all different positions, like you know how many. I literally wrote out how many sets and everything like that. I have it on my little notebook, but I just you just get. I just feel like it really helps just tighten the area, if that makes sense. And you can like I'm someone who always says as well, train your abs, because when you get conditioned, you can always tell who trains their abs and not. And obviously for bikini, you don't want like really developed abs, but if you don't do any ab work, I feel like the conditioning isn't as good in your core. I see it all the time. Like, and I can like tell people, and then I'll ask them like, "Do you train abs?" And they'll say no. I'm like, I don't tell them, but like, I can see that you don't. Like because just like the everything is just so much tighter when you diet down, and like people can argue with me on that, but like I personally really believe that you should train abs a little bit because it just makes such a big difference when you're stage lean. Like it just looks harder. It's just like any muscle. Like it just looks harder and like more conditioned. But yeah, stomach vacuums I feel like it's just good for core control. When you're on stage, you obviously don't want to vacuum, but you can feel it a lot. And same with ab training, it will help you engage your core more and like keep it tight and have more like mind to muscle connection with it, I guess.
They should do that on stage as part of the competition. Who does the best stomach vacuums? That would be a big part of the competition, I think. But yeah, I mean, don't make my mistake where I trained abs so much, where I trained them every single day, where it got to the fact where I kind of had like when I was in my best shape, like early in my late teens, early 20s, where I sort of had like those CrossFit abs where they just stick out so much because they like became like a muscle in and of themselves. So I made that mistake where then it's like, oh, they're like
Yeah.
so
I
blocky that
used to train them every day too, but like I never train them with weight. I think that's the main thing. I never progressively overload them. I never train them with weight. I just do, light. I don't like feel like I'm going to failure or anything like that. It's just more of a stimulus, I think, because like you don't want to develop them, but you just want some, you know, a little bit of development there.
Well, and you said that shoulders was the one body part that like you neglected to train early on because they were already so developed. But shoulders is the number one body part that I hear from, especially women on this podcast. It's the hardest body part for them to grow. And like you said, you were able to get yours back up eventually. But how did you get your shoulders to grow back? Because I would get killed in the comments down below by people saying like, "Oh, you didn't ask her about how she got her shoulders to grow." So like, I'm trying to find the secret
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, mine literally like blew up in my first off season. Like, I need to put something on my Instagram, like a comparison. I think I have before, but like people say like genetics, right? I genuinely like they weren't even that like they were. I took a like what's it called when you lay out and you do a comparison, and they were actually so flat before like, and before I did my first off season. So in that off season, I trained them. So I've always done. I changed to do a 3 upper 3 lower split, but they all have different focuses. That's what I had. I've always done like a lot of upper, but then I did 3 upper 3 lower because I really need to bring up my legs. But then I do delts on all days, and then I also did on my hamstring and glute day. I added some delts onto the end of that as well. So I had like 4 days a week of like hammering my delts, and I just make sure I hit all parts. So rear delts every single workout. So now I do push, pull, and a full upper, and I do rear delts in all of those as well. Even though you don't really normally do on push rear delts, I still do them on rear delts. I do rear delts then, and then lots of lateral raises. I think people. This is going to be like such a hit and miss thing, but I honestly think heavy partials really helped. Like people will be like, "Oh no, like it's such a shit exercise. It's hardly any range of motion." But honestly, like I hammered them in my off season, and they actually made such a difference. Obviously, it was combined with everything else as well, but like just a lot of lateral raises, variations, a lot of different rep ranges, a lot of different like. I feel like you can just hammer delts so much, and like it takes them a lot to like not recover. Like they recover so fast. Heavy presses and yeah, just making sure you're targeting all of them properly. People always, I think a lot of bikini competitors or just bodybuilders in general always just think like lateral raises and that's it. Like they forget their rear delts as well. And I think always program rear delts as well, at least in one of your workouts, right at the beginning of your workout, like when you're fresh, instead of just like leaving it to the end all the time.
I cannot tell you how many times, people have made the mistake, especially early on in their training, where they just think, lateral raises are the only thing for shoulders,
Yeah.
where that's all you do. And then a lot of my friends, they'd be like, "Oh, I want to go train shoulders," and I was like, "Oh, what part are you thinking of?" And they're like, "Oh, just the shoulder part." It's like, no, there's 3 different parts. So then I gotta educate them and be like, "No, you gotta do separate exercise for them. Otherwise, you'll just have a really big front shoulder, really, and maybe a little bit of a side." But it's like, no, your rear delts, good. They just look kind of weird with that, but yeah. So people always gotta make sure to realize that as well. But we see that you have a Monster Factory T-shirt. Are you sponsored by them or?
No, I'm not sponsored, but I got this from the Arnolds. I actually competed for the Arnolds the first year, but this year I just came to watch. I watched a pro show as well, and I just absolutely loved this t-shirt. So I was like, I'm going to buy it.
Well, and also this is such a tight knit community, which is another thing that just amazed me about, especially the female side of it, where it's like everyone really seems to be close with each other, and everyone really does care about each other. How important is that for you to like know that the moment that you step on stage, like so many people have your back, and especially in the sport, because that's a very rarity in sports where like everyone generally cares about each other and they're so nice to each other.
Yeah, I think it's like the connections you make through bodybuilding is like second to none. Like all of my best mates are bodybuilders. Like everyone understands each other, everyone supports each other, and it's like as well, like when you change from kind of being like in the gym community to like the bodybuilding community, you don't realize how big the bodybuilding community is on Instagram. Like you'd go from having all these like Gymshark like people on your feed to like all these bodybuilders on your feed, and like now it's just like it's like a whole different world, and it's so supportive as well. And like I will speak to people all over the world, and as well like all categories as well, not just bikini, all the men's, all the females, like everyone supports each other. Like it doesn't matter what category or what gender you are, like everyone supports each other, which I just love so much.
Yeah, it really is a great aspect about the sport that I don't think is talked about as much as it should be, just the camaraderie and just the type of people that you'll meet. But my $1 million question, if someone were to walk up to you and say, Scarlett, we made a decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Oh my gosh. There's so many different things.
You can name more than one, for sure. Name all you want.
Okay. Some of them might be a bit like harsh.
No, that's fine.
I think if you're like one of them that just comes to mind because I did like a post on a TikTok. I just made one earlier. If you're out of condition bikini, you shouldn't be on the wellness stage. Like you shouldn't just use that as an excuse to be in wellness because that's just like an offense to people who are wellness. That's one thing. um, oh gosh, there's so many. I think backstage. I think some people maybe like wine should be banned. Like just alcohol should be banned backstage. I just don't get it. I just think it's silly, and especially like if people are then having it straight after the show when they're dehydrated as well, it just kind of like it's just silly. About the actual sport, I can't really think of some things.
Prize money is one thing for me where it's like, good
Yeah,
God, you got to make it so that people can actually maybe have a living.
I was thinking about so in the UK, there's like quite a few things like I would hope like next year they're saying they're getting better, which I get like obviously you do get better each year, but I think there should be more money put in towards like the lighting, for example. Like everyone on the podcast and like the biggest bodybuilding podcast on like YouTube, we all know that like the lighting in the UK is like shit compared to abroad, and like the productions aren't as like big or like the stages aren't as good and all that sort of stuff. So maybe like a bit more money in towards those. And then I was thinking about prize money this morning. I was thinking about the Olympia, and I was just thinking like, what is like? Do you know? I don't know if you know. Like, is men's physique and bikini like the same, or are the men's are all more than the women's?
Oh, it's way more. It's like 10, it's like 10, 15 times as more.
Yeah. I know like men's bodybuilding is like ridiculous, but I kind of understand because that's where like the Olympia kind of like stem from. But like yeah, it is like a big gap. I think we do need more money, and I think as well like just the pro like I get it for amateurs like maybe even get a little bit of money would be fine, but like the pros need more money. Like it's not even just the amateurs. Like I wouldn't even care if the amateurs do like as an amateur. I wouldn't even care if we got more money. I think the pro bikini girls like I was seeing how much they get. It's like one girl gets 1,000, like 400, 100. I was like, that is literally nothing for like that is your basically career. Like I just think there's not enough money for that. So I'd rather the money go into like the pros and the amateurs saying that as an amateur.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that should be one thing where the moment that you become a pro, it's like, yeah, you can now start to make some money in the sport. But yeah, it should obviously be a lot more because a lot of these times, you're spending more money to even compete in these shows than, even, in any of the earnings that you get.
Oh my gosh, the money to go into the Arnolds, like that was my second ever show. It was just absolutely ridiculous. Like for two like divisions, it was like £300 on top of everything else. It was like literally just two classes, sorry, not divisions, like juniors and first timers, like class A, sorry, like 300 quid or something like that. It was just madness, and that's not forgetting every other thing. Like as well as a female, you've still got like your hair, your makeup, your like bikini, which is so expensive compared to like what men wear. So yeah, it was a lot of money.
Yeah, when you add that all up, it is a ridiculous amount that I was not really aware of before I started this podcast. But, Scarlett, when we have you on a year from now, because I'd love to have you on a year to see where you're at in your journey, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding journey? Where would you like to be at in your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved a year from today?
So I should be moving to Australia at the start of next year. So maybe in Australia, but I'm competing later on in the year at this. Well, what's it? No, around like August, September, October time. So we'll see how those shows go. I definitely know that I'm not going to be pro level, but I want to be much better than I am. Like I'm realistic. Like so, I just want to be much bigger than I am, much better than I am, and just bring a kind of like unrecognizable each year.
Why Australia?
Because when I said like I wanted to go there on a working holiday visa before lockdown, like I've still had that visa, and want to like go over there and do that. And the weather as well. Like the weather's awful here, so I just want the sun and I just want to like live a more outdoor kind of lifestyle instead of being like cold and like in here.
Be careful what you wish for when it gets to be like whatever, how hot it gets down there, especially during the summertime. But yeah, I know I've always wanted to go to Australia myself. I eventually will go one of these days because I've had so many friends go there and they just talk about, just how beautiful it is. So I can't really fault you for that at all. But lastly, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Um, I do want to mention I just my appreciation for like Tom Hames. From Evolution Training. I think he's done a lot for me. Same with his brother Ben. Just in the bodybuilding, like he helped me for my first ever my peak week this time round. Like he helped me so much, and he'd always be like, he was always there for me, even though he wasn't he never coached me fully, but like he always supported me always, and like has done so much for me in bodybuilding. And I just think he's like, I genuinely think he is the best coach in the UK, and he's going to be making like a lot of like big. He's already got pros, but he's going to like make big waves in the next like 10 years. And just my appreciation for just like him and his brother as well, like, and just like everyone who's mates with me in general, like have helped me so much in my bodybuilding journey and just always supported me. So
I have heard the name before, and I have a lot of people that I think it's been mentioned like 2 or 3 times on the podcast before, and people have mentioned, how good of a guy he is now, how much he's doing. So I will say everyone look out for that as well, and I'll leave a link to his stuff down below. But otherwise, Scarlett, I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below too. Buyer beware, everyone. You will get off that couch and stop eating all those Twinkies, hopefully, by just taking a look at what she, posts on her account. But again, Scarlett, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey. I mean, it was an absolute delight, and I cannot wait to have you on again.
thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.